Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Derling. Joining me once again is Jeff Whitcher from Jeff Whitcher's Vinyl Destination. Hello, Jeff.
Hi, Tom. How's it going?
Good. On this episode, we're going to go way back. We're going to go back 50 years, and each of us are going to count down our top five albums from 1972. So again, like the 1971 episode, this one predates me, but there was a lot of good music, and I think we both got it narrowed down to five. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I think we'll have some commonalities, but I'm also pretty sure we'll have some differences too. Um, so Jeff, I guess we might as well get right into it. If you want to start out with your number five.
Yeah, sure. So my number five, this is, I think, probably my favorite album by this particular artist. And I know it's probably going to be one that you'll show as well, but it is School's Out by Alice Cooper. This was released on June 30th, 1972. And one thing that I didn't realize is that the cover of this, I mean, of course, it opens up, like a desk, like that. But what I didn't realize is that the cover had actually been used before. It was a band called Hot Legs, and they had an album that's called Thinks, School Stinks. And it was the same idea. It's the top of a desk, and it's got the name of the album kind of like etched into the wood on the desk. I don't know if it opened as a desk like this one does, but I didn't realize until I was researching this album that it was actually identical to that one that was released in 2 years before. And this actual desk was the one photographed on this cover is on display at the Hard Rock Cafe in Los Angeles. But School's Out obviously is a favorite summer anthem. Was on classic rock radio. Looney Tune is another favorite of mine. I like Gutter Cat versus the Jets, and then Street Fight, the instrumental. It's almost like a mini rock opera kind of there at the end of side one. Public Animal number 9 is kind of a poppy track until Alice's vocal comes in. It's sort of an interesting kind of a song for Alice Cooper. And then my favorite track on this album is Alma Mater. It's one of my favorite deeper Alice Cooper album tracks. The vocal sounds like it's coming from a transistor radio. It's kind of got a underwater quality to it. But yeah, I really enjoy this album. A lot of these tracks were played on the radio when I was growing up. And so I just kind of had a natural affinity for it.
You know, it's interesting. I actually don't have that album on my list, and I'm a big Alice Cooper fan, but I had it on my initial list. But then I listened through to everything that that I had out from '72, and it got bopped out of the top five by other ones that I liked more. It's interesting with the Alice Cooper band. I mean, I don't. Most people don't give a lot of time to the first two albums, "Pretty's for You," "Easy Action," but "Love It to Death" I just think is so fantastic an album, and so almost pointing the way to the future in a strange way. And oddly, I think that Killer and School's Out sound like they would have come out before Love It to Death. Like it's obviously those two albums are better than the first two albums. I mean, this is the real Alice, right? The Bob Ezrin Alice. But I just got listening to it and think, man, none of these songs have stuck to me, other than, of course, School's Out, which is almost like Alice's Rock and Roll All Night. Like, if you're a diehard fan, yeah, it's a great song, but you need never hear it again. But
Right.
it's a great song. You hear it every year, at the end of the school year, and it's exciting, and it's been covered many times. But yeah, a lot of the other songs on the album just have never stuck with me. I do think Looney Tune is probably one of my favorites. And certainly, if we were doing a top 10, it would be hovering there. But yeah, I actually don't have that one. So first shocker of the night. The excuse me, next one, or my number five, is a band that we've talked about, a band that you've been slowly but surely getting stuff in their catalog. And the actually, spoiler alert, the only Canadian band in this list is April Wine. Um, their first album came out in Canada only in 1971, and then they followed it up in 1972 with the cleverly titled and packaged On Record, where you've got side one, like the faces are ghosted in here, and then you've got side two. This is on Aquarius Records. This is a gatefold, which is kind of surprising for a relatively new band. And this was a really successful album for them. It gave them their first hit single in Canada and in the US. It gave them one of the 3 top 40 singles they had in the US, which was You Could Have Been a Lady, which is a hot chocolate song, but they kind of rocked it up. It also, the other well-known song off here is their cover of Elton John's, it's kind of an obscure song for him, Bad Side of the Moon. Drop Your Guns is a good rocker. They did that in concert a lot. And, there's some stuff on here that I find sounds really, really dated, more back to the first album, but there's enough good on it that it came in at my number 5. And this album was also their American debut, but it was self-titled. So a lot of, US fans would probably think this was their first album, and it wasn't. So the pictures of the band that are inside that gatefold are what the company Big Tree ended up using for this. This is a really old cassette with a slipcase and it's just self-titled. Same album. Songs are in a slightly different order, and April Wine diehards will know that apparently unbeknownst to the band, the producer Ralph Murphy put these weird sort of interludes in between each song, sort of like old time radio serials where you hear like, and the band apparently didn't know anything about it until the album came out. I don't know why they did it. If you're hearing the album in its entirety, parts of the tracks will contain, if you're listening to the CD, parts of the tracks will contain these little interludes. But if you hear the songs on compilations that made compilations, they wisely edited those out. So yeah, second April Wine album, whether you call it self-titled or on record, that's my number 5.
Right. Well, my number 4, I am going to go with an artist who actually, I just saw a trailer they're coming out with a movie about. I don't know if it's going to be a documentary or part documentary, part biopic, but I'm going to go with David Bowie and the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. It's kind of a glam rock opera, if you will. It was released June 16th, 1972. It was produced by Ken Scott, who was actually an engineer for the Beatles, along with David Bowie. It got to number 5 in the UK, number 75 in the US, which just blows my mind. I can't believe it charted so low over here.
As well regarded as that is, 75.
Yeah. And then it was number 59 in Canada, so a bit higher than the US chart position. But it's a loose concept album. Like I say, it's very much in the glam rock vein. The first time David Bowie had adopted kind of this androgynous look, this Ziggy Stardust persona that would carry through to the tour for this album. I mean, the concept is generally carried forward with the first track, which is 5 years, talking about the Earth has 5 years before this impending apocalypse, which is going to happen. And David Bowie is this androgynous bisexual rock star who's sent to Earth to save the Earth before this apocalypse. And he ends up winning the hearts of fans, but then suffers this fall of grace because he succumbs to his own ego. But you got the hits Suffragette City, which was all over the radio. Ziggy Stardust, the title track, obviously, Moon Age Daydream. And Mick Ronson's guitar was such an integral part of Bowie's sound, especially on these early David Bowie albums, kind of much in the way Ozzy Osbourne and Randy Rhoads had that kind of like songwriting riff partnership. But yeah, it's a great album. I think it's his first album that really kind of established him over here. I mean, you had the song Space Oddity, but in terms of an actual album that really kind of made an impact and continues to do so today, I think that album is probably one of his best.
It's definitely one of the most beloved Bowie albums. And over the years, you come to learn things like you were saying with the Alice Cooper Schools Out album cover uh, being already done by the group Hot Legs. A lot of times you find out that these things weren't 100% original. I mean,
Hmm.
we're Led Zeppelin fans. We know about that, right? But you beg, borrow, steal things that are cool, and if it's something that's a little bit more obscure, yeah, it's going to be the one that people will say, "Hey, they ripped off." The thing that came after it. Where I'm going with this is the chorus of Suffragette City. Well, actually, not the chorus, but the outro of it, where he just Suffragette City, da 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 da. That reminds me of "Come On and Love Me" by Kiss.
Yeah,
I think that was an influence. I'm not saying it's direct, but it just reminds me of it, and it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, it's glam, right? And who
sure.
I mean, Bowie influenced everybody, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, and Kiss, I don't think they, hid from their influences. I think they
No.
were very, very upfront about who influenced them and stuff that they borrowed and
Yeah.
riffs that they borrowed.
Yeah.
So
You listen
yeah,
to
it doesn't
The
surprise me.
Move and Slade, and I'm sure there's other Bowie things there. I mean, Starman, I mean, Star Child, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. So my
Right.
number four is kind of an obscure album, not exactly an obscure band, and it's actually an album that I just kind of discovered this year. I'd never owned it before. It's the second Thin Lizzy album. It's called Shades of a Blue Orphanage, and originally came out on Duram, or not Duram, Decca Records. So this is a reissue. The original album only had 9 songs on it. This has got 18 songs on it. It's got a bunch of bonus songs. This is in their initial lineup, where it's Phil Lynott, Brian Downey, and Eric Bell on guitar. So it's before Scott Gorham and Brian Robertson. It's not as hard rock, but it's undeniably Thin Lizzy, and I really like the opening track on here. It's got a funny title, "The Rise and Dear Demise of the Funky Nomadic Tribes." It's got some really cool drum and guitar work, and of course, it's Phil Lynott's storytelling, already formed. Like it's not so old that you're like, wow, I can't even tell who that is. You can tell that it's Thin Lizzy. It's just not as hard rocking as they would become, like on Jailbreak and Bad Reputation. But some good songs on here. Babyface is kind of an early, like, heavier one. Um, Now, one of the bonus tracks is one of those situations where it's a song that they're well known for, but never actually belonged to an album, and it's their version of "Whiskey in the Jar," which is traditional Irish song, but it's been done tons of times since then. I mean, Metallica did it in the '90s, kind of brought it back into public consciousness, but I don't consider that part of the album. But yeah, a good album, and a band that I need to delve more into, but I liked it well enough that it placed at number 4 for me.
Yeah, is that the original album cover?
Yeah,
Isn't that okay? All right.
yeah,
I saw the
it,
black Decca up in the
yeah,
right
it's
hand corner of there. Because
yeah,
a lot
it's
of the Rolling Stones early albums when they were on Decca Records have that on the
yeah,
UK
and
pressing.
I think it's a complete. Let me just get the booklet out here. This is I'm trying to see when this reissue, 2007, I guess. But yeah, that's the original cover, and this is the band shot. And apparently, a couple of the band members. It's a complicated story when you start reading about the history of Thin Lizzy. But a couple of the band members were in a band called either Orphanage or Blue Orphanage. Maybe it's just Orphanage. But then there was that band called Skid Row that Gary Moore was in, and I think Phil was in, or maybe Brian was in briefly. It's all of these things intertwining before they sort of solidify into the bands that we would better know.
Right. Nothing to do with the Sebastian Bach.
Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I understand that there had to be some money paid through Doc McGee to let them use that name, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure they did. All right, my number three, and this is, and I was actually like, wow, this is their sixth album because for me, it always seems like it's so early in their catalog until you consider this was actually what people refer to as the Mark II lineup. But I'm
Yeah.
going with Deep Purple, Machine Head, and people say this isn't their favorite Deep Purple album. I think just because of the overexposure of all the radio hits on here. Like you got obviously Smoke on the Water, which is Deep Purple's Stairway to Heaven. You got Highway Star, Space Truckin', which were just played to death on FM radio back in the day, but I don't care. I like it. I love this album. It doesn't matter to me, that it is overplayed. Is it my favorite Deep Purple album? It's definitely top two. I think it changes. I go back and forth between this one and In Rock. But it was released March 25th, 1972. It got to #1 in the UK, #4 in the US, and #2 in Canada. So it ranked really high in Canada as well. Of course, the story behind Smoke on the Water is they hired the Rolling Stones mobile studio to record this album. And they had block booked the Montreux Casino as a venue, but during a Frank Zappa concert, immediately before they were supposed to be starting the recording sessions, the casino burned to the ground because of some stupid with a flare gun. The song basically recounts the story, kind of the struggles that they had bringing this album and recording it. But yeah, I love that. The cover, it's got kind of one of those goofy, Deep Purple covers where their image is distorted in some way. But I mean, it's a classic. If anybody has one Deep Purple album, that's going to be the one that they own. And the songs, probably most songs that they would recognize would be on that album.
I love the story, and it's in the classic albums DVD. This is early days, right? It's the early 70s when they ended up recording the album. Where they were recording it, they couldn't actually listen to the playback. They had to go to another location to actually listen back and then go back and do some more recording. It's just very, very quaint.
Yeah, not an ideal way.
Yeah, more on that later. My number 3 is the second album from ZZ Top, Rio Grande Mud. This is a 1980s era issue on cassette, Canadian cassette, because this doesn't look anything like old cassettes looked like. As a matter of fact, this album probably would have looked, when it originally came out, probably would have looked something like that. It would have been one of those types of things. They were on London Records. ZZ Top right from the beginning sounded like themselves. This has Just Got Paid, which is one of my absolute favorite ZZ Top songs. It's got such a cool riff. It's got excellent slide guitar. Chevrolet's a fun song. It's got a really, really good melodic blues ballad on here called Sure Got Cold After the Rain Fell. And I mean, it's got plenty of, the ZZ Top double entendres. I mean, you get Cocoa Blue, Whiskey and Mama Down Brownie. Half the time I have no idea what Billy Gibbons or Dusty Hill are saying. I also like the cover of this because it's an optical illusion. I'll take it out of the case. I actually don't have this on vinyl, but at first it looks like a buffalo, like a rack off of a buffalo, but it's actually, there you go. It's actually the 3 members of the band, and it's a simple concept, but it's really, really cool. And they also the other cool things, when you look inside of those early albums, they don't have the long beards. As a matter of fact, I don't even think Billy Gibbons has any facial hair on the inside of that one. I'm not even sure, but
I think isn't it like right around the Fandango album where they finally started
to grow the beards out? Yeah, because even on Tres Hombres, they hadn't quite. I think they were wearing the cowboy hats, but they hadn't started to grow the beards out. So yeah, Rio Grande Mud, my number 3.
Great pick. All right, well, I kind of gave mine away a little bit, just by virtue of what I'm wearing. But I'm going to go for my number 2 with Black Sabbath's 4th album, Volume 4, of course. Kind of do the color reversal there on the back, but yeah, it's their 4th album. It's their 4th album, obviously, with the classic Ozzy lineup. Cocaine was starting to play a very big part now in their recording sessions. In fact, they would joke that, and I don't know, maybe they weren't even joking. They said they would send speakers full of cocaine into the studio while they were recording this album. And in fact, the original title of it was going to be called Snowblind, just because of all the cocaine use that was going on. And the record company's like, no, we're not going with a album title that overtly drug oriented. And so they ended up changing it. But Snowblind obviously is a track on this album. It was released September 25th, 1972. And it was the first album that Black Sabbath produced themselves. It got to number 5 in the UK, number 13 in the US, and number 5 in Canada as well. So it did just as well in Canada as it did in the UK. You got Tomorrow's Dream on here, which is got a classic Tony Iommi riff. One of the first Black Sabbath ballads, as it were, with the song Changes.
Yeah.
It's kind of this gentle piano ballad, and then you got the mellotron on the chorus. Laguna Sunrise. They were starting to branch out a little bit more and experiment with their sound. Laguna Sunrise is a neoclassical Tony Iommi instrumental. You got Supernaut, Cornucopia, which is one of the sludgiest and heaviest tracks that they recorded early on. And then you got this weird, I don't even know if you can call it an instrumental, it's called FX. But it was this weird studio experiment. Apparently, Tony Iommi had been smoking hashish, and he was wearing a crucifix at the time. And the crucifix hit the strings of the guitar that he was playing, and it made this weird sound. And so, what the sound of it is them hitting the strings of a guitar with this echo. And it's just a very bizarre, it sounds like really early Pink Floyd, like sort of the Syd Barrett era Pink Floyd track. So they would just do weird stuff like that. I think a lot of it had to do with cocaine, but so much of this, like I think, influence with that drop D tuning, influencing scores of grunge bands like the Soundgardens and Alice in Chains and those bands in the 90s. So it would kind of take some of these riffs as their template.
Cool. My number 2 is one that was previously mentioned, Deep Purple, Machine Head. Of course, I got to hold an 8-track up at least once, right? This is a really beat-up Canadian 8-track of Machine Head. It could probably stand with a replacement. Yeah, it's a weird cover. It would actually have made more sense if they'd have put the back cover as the front cover, because Machine Heads are I don't know if they're the tuning pegs, but it's a part of a guitar. Instead of that like washed out blurry photo of the band. But I mean, it's iconic because it's their biggest selling album. I mean, Smoke on the Water is a standard. I really like Pictures of Home. It's kind of I don't know what you'd call it, a little bit more gothic sounding maybe, but it's definitely it's in the heavy metal vein. It's not heavy per se. Maybe I'm a Leo is a fun, like a funky hard rock song. And I mean, yeah, Highway Star and Space Truck. And I mean, I don't get sick of those two. And, this is a really, really strong album for them. And it's, it's one of the reasons why it's the best selling album. I also got this out because it may be the only album that I actually have a tribute to just the one album. This is called Remachined, a tribute to Deep Purple's Machine Head. This came out, I think Classic Rock Magazine put this out. And I just happened to find a copy without the magazine that went with it. It came out in 2012. So it's got things on it like Chickenfoot doing Highway Star. That's a live clip. It's got, oddly enough, it's got Glenn Hughes, who would later join Deep Purple, doing Maybe I'm a Leo. It's got Iron Maiden doing Space Truckin'. It's got Metallica picked an interesting song on here called When a Blind Man Cries, which isn't on Machine Head, but it was a B-side to one of the singles. So it's in the right era. It's also got Kings of Chaos doing Never Before. Kings of Chaos in this case is Joe Elliott, Steve Stevens, Duff McKagan, and Matt Sorum. So it's kind of fun. I don't like all of the songs on here, but I kind of picked it up for the curio value. So yeah, that's my number 2.
Cool. Yeah, I actually saw Glenn Hughes last year. He was playing with the Dead Daisies, which is kind of a band of sort of substitute members in and out, but his voice still sounds incredible.
Oh, he's a freak of nature. I mean, he's 76, 77, something like that, and he still sings. And he's lucky to be alive because he almost killed himself with drugs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right. Well, I just, if you'll indulge me, I just wanted to show a couple albums that did not make my pick, sort of my, honorable mentions. Eat a Peach by Allman Brothers Band, Emerson, Lake and Palmer Trilogy, their third album. You had just done a yacht rock episode, and so you may be familiar with this artist. Steely Dan, Can't Buy a Thrill.
Yeah.
Their first album. And Genesis Foxtrot, which is a prog rock masterpiece. And then last honorable mention, Rolling Stones, Exile on Main Street, their double album opus, one of their greatest albums. So my number one, and if this isn't your number one, Tim pick, I'm going to be very disappointed. Going to go with Yes, Close to the Edge, my favorite progressive rock album of all time. Only 3 tracks, but the first track, I'd buy it for the first track alone. You know, Close to the Edge, that title track, where it just moves throughout so many different suites, and just a frenetic opening on that track. And it just illustrates how dynamic, how incredible those musicians were playing on that album. It's always been my favorite. I mean, and as if the first track wasn't enough, then you got And You and I, which is another one of my favorite Yes tracks. You know, the cover, it's interesting that they picked kind of such a plain, I know we had talked about this in our Yes episode, but just kind of a plain, you know, it's got the Roger Dean logo here, but apart from that, I think it's effective though. It's striking. It stands out in the album rack.
It would have stood out. Yeah. You would have been, there'd been no mistaking what it was. Yeah. So yeah, it's my number one too. I mean, it's a fantastic album. I got a pretty pink 8-track here of it. And of course it's all, you get these 3 long tracks, and they're just for curiosity's sake. Program 1 is Close to the Edge Part 1. So it's got the Solid Time of Change, Total Mass Retain, I Get Up, I Get Down. Program 2 is Close to the Edge Part 2, I Get Up, I Get Down Part 2, Seasons of Man. And Program 3 is And You and I Part 1, Court of Life, Eclipse, The Preacher, The Teacher. And Program 4 is And You and I Part 2, Apocalypse. And I love Siberian Khatru, the short song on the album, but it rocks. Like, it's one of their more rocking songs. And I just, yeah, the whole album is fantastic. And if you were to look at it, you think, how can it be that good? It's only got 3 songs. Like, wouldn't it get really indulgent? But the parts are always so interesting and interweaving. And yeah, it's the last one that Bill Bruford was on before he left to join King Crimson. I think the side of this too is kind of cool. It's kind of personalized.
I love that.
And I brought a prop along for this because it's something we didn't talk about in any of our Yes episodes, I don't think. But the bubble logo that Roger Dean adopted for Yes, the identifiable Yes logo, I wonder if it was even subconsciously influenced by this.
Oh,
I see similarity in the bubble letters.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm not sure, but I just got thinking about that. I said that kind of. I was listening to Zeppelin 3, and I was looking at the cover. I was like, that reminds me of the Yes logo, and of course, it came out first. So
right.
Yeah.
Wow. I bet you're right, though. I mean, that was sort of the design was very early 70s.
Some honor. I didn't bring any out, but some honorable mentions for me would have been obviously Alice Cooper's School's Out. Fleetwood Mac, Bare Trees, which is another album that I wasn't overly familiar with until like not too long ago. It's from the Bob Welch era, and it's got an interesting mix of songs on it. It's got a song on it called Child of Mine, not Sweet Child of Mine, but which is kind of a rocker. It's also got a song on it called Sentimental Lady, which Bob Welch would re-record 5 years later solo and have a pretty big hit with, oddly enough, with Lindsey Buckingham and Christine McVie on background vocals. And REO Speedwagon, REO 2, which is a pretty hard rocking album for them. And it was the first one that Kevin Cronin sang on. So those would have been my honorable mentions. But that's our top 5 from 50 years ago. What albums would you have put on this list? Would you agree, disagree with our rankings? Let us know in the comments. And Jeff, thanks for sitting in with me once again. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, always a pleasure as well. And, I feel like I'm the oldest friend you have because I'm always recruited for the 70s because I was the only one alive back then.
It's a mark of distinction if you have to look at it that way. And actually, I don't think you are, but yeah. So don't forget, follow Jeff Whitcher's Vinyl Destination on YouTube. He's always posting content, got some cool episodes on there. And thank you, as always, for watching Tim's Vinyl Confessions.